IVM.
Welcome to Absolutely Right, a show designed to celebrate and decode minds of some amazing achievers. I am your host, Aditi Surana. I am a graphologist and a high-performance coach. Our guest today, Vasundhara Das, is a well-known singer, actor, and music composer. Her filmography as an actor includes internationally acclaimed movies like Hey Ram, Meera Nair's Monsoon Wedding, and many others. As a playback singer, she has sung more than 60 songs for A.R. Rahman, Vishal Shekhar, Shankar Ehsaan Loy, and many other amazing composers. What you might not be aware of about Vasundhara's journey is that she runs a company called Drumjam with her husband and partner Roberto Narayan. They have managed to make 500,000 people experience the transformational power of music through group drumming. Over the past 10 years, they have worked with diverse communities and various leaders across sectors. You can know more about their work on drumjam.in and communitydrumjamfoundation.in. In today's conversation, while analyzing Vasundhara's handwriting, we explored many things. How does she use voice as a medium to allow people to express their hidden and unexplored emotions? How her signature reveals, what part of her signature reveals her discomfort in socially superficial situations? How Vasundhara consciously chooses her growth process by setting out uncomfortable experiments? And lastly, what can you learn about yourself from the tilt or slant of your handwriting stroke? Vasundhara will introduce us to her passionate and musical journey on the other side of this short break. Stay tuned.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Want to wish you all a happy Diwali. Hope you had a great festive season. It's been a great week in terms of the kinds of guests we've had and the kind of conversations we've had on the network this week. Do definitely check some of these things out. On This Round's on Me with Gauri Devidayal, she had a great conversation with Garima Arora, who's one of the best-known chefs in the world. It was just absolutely riveting. Do check that out. On States of Anarchy, Hamsini Hariharan spoke about chronicling India's different wars. Again, really interesting episode. Check that out. Ashton had a very interesting episode on his show, The Habit Coach. It was called I Don't Feel Like Doing Anything. It's about how to overcome malaise just generally, and I thought really, really interesting stuff. Kumi Vayana was the guest on Cyrus Says on Monday's episode last week, and she's an educator, and my God, it was such a fascinating conversation talking about the way education functions in India and some of the changes she'd like to see. Just really, really interesting stuff. Do give that a listen. On Uncle Please Sit, Anupam Manur was there with Joel and Tushar talking about the Indian economy, part one of a two-part series. Second part will be out this week. You should definitely check that out. Lastly, I want to talk to you all about the Filter Coffee podcast. Karthik Nagarajan, who hosts that show, is on a little bit of a break. He's back with a banger of an episode. It is with Himura Maya, who used to run Landmark Stores, and they talk about the culture of bookstores and quizzing and all kinds of stuff. Really interesting conversation. Do check that out. And with that, let me get you back to your show.
Hi Vasundhara, how are you doing? So we know your story as an actor, as a singer, and I was so thrilled and curious to know about your story as a drum circle facilitator. Tell us more about Drum Circle.
Basically, a drum circle is a group of people that sit in a circular seating arrangement and they play drums and percussion instruments together. It's as simple as that. Then usually there is a facilitator that takes them through that journey. Yeah. Facilitates them through from them, a lot of them touching an instrument for the first time in their lives, to a point where they're all playing together and it's actually musical and rhythmical. Okay. And then by the end of it, that particular group of people comes to form a very deep and strong, a dialogue and a form of communication that isn't really using words, but isn't any less expressive than any conversation might have been.
That's great.
So for a lot of people, they walk away from a drum circle with a lot of different things, depending on where they are in their personal lives. So for example, lots of people find a sense of stress release. A lot of people find a sense of catharsis. A lot of people find deep relaxation. A lot of people just feel that they can express themselves and be creative. Because as facilitators, we try our level best to make it a non-judgmental space. So it's not exactly, a place where musicians would come and show their prowess. Rather, it's a place where anybody of any level of skill can come and express themselves. So that's more the important.
That's so interesting when you say this, because for me, handwriting expresses that aspect of your deeper emotion and your connection where your body takes over, and it talks about things that otherwise you can't believe and you can't even understand. And here you are approaching the same mind-body coordination from a different perspective altogether. It's so fascinating to learn about it.
In 2006, we started a company called Drumjam, which did this for corporations mainly. And then subsequently, we started a foundation called Community Drumjam Foundation, which, we've been organizing community drum circles for Bangaloreans in the center of town, free of cost. People just walk in and drum together and stuff like that. So that's been happening since 2013. And also, we've realized that a lot of populations aren't able to access those, even though the community drum circles are in a public space, accessible public space. So to those kinds of communities, like people in old age homes or people in, children at risk, kids at risk, girls at risk, Parkinson's patients, patients with dementia, we try and take it to them as often as we can. Of course, this is up until the pandemic, because it's a community activity where people gather together in large numbers, and there is a tactile activity involved. You're touching something. So the pandemic just kind of made us pause.
So are you doing something online for people to connect to this activity?
The sense of it is really in person. So when you can take it online and you can do something, but it's not going to be a drum circle. It's going to be an engagement of some sort that involves rhythm or music, but you can't really call it a drum circle.
When you look at connecting with yourself, through music, through all these activities, for our listeners, is there anything you can say that they can do? Because, your journey has been deeper with music, and one can see how you have evolved over a period of time. There are almost like different upgrades of your personality. Like I was going through your older interviews and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that the person you have evolved is the same person, because you can see the transition, which is very drastic. So what were your tools or what were your methods that you used to go through this transition?
So I think that, in a country like India, with the kind of cultural heritage that we grow up with and we take for granted, our foundations are really deep and really strong. So, for example, if I had to talk about it from the perspective of music itself, from, age 6, I remember that my mom and my grandmom at home would, keep asking me to do riyaz at home, which is basically, everyone knows it's saregama, or very early in the morning with your harmonium or your tantra. So those are things that one just sort of compartmentalized as music and just took completely for granted, and then, let it be in that little capsule. When you look at it from a different perspective of, say, how often do we vocalize as human beings? How often do we allow ourselves to truly and really express ourselves? Say what we want to say, or say what we're feeling. How much of our true feelings and emotions do we actually hold back? And how much of that can we correlate to a simple exercise, alankar, of just holding a note?
So can people without any training use that as a way to express themselves?
Definitely. And I think we all do, we have our own, without realizing it, we vocalize, we use sounds from our voice box, and we kind of, when you're tired, you may just, and that's a vocalization in itself,
I never connected with voice before the podcast ever. So when I started listening to my own voice, I realized that it is so honest and it says everything that you feel and everything that you are trying to hide and trying to emote. It just is one of the honest communications that we are not aware of. And what you're saying makes sense to me only because of my few months of experience in podcasting. When I heard myself for the first time. That's true.
But think about it, when you go to school in India, you're told to keep quiet
all the time,
right? You're told to keep quiet. You're told not to
speak loudly.
We hear about this all the time in a lot of different places. Like, when you go into work, the best advice someone will give you is, just stay below radar. So there's a lot that's unsaid. And there's a lot that's unspoken or unsung in us. And so when when I thought about that, and I went back to this whole thing of this, all we do in Riyaz is hold sa. It's doing two things. It's allowing you to breathe deeply, and it's allowing you to vocalize. It's allowing you to release something, which we
do. Both of them.
We don't realize how much we don't do it.
So interesting. Breathing deeply has its own connection with yourself, and most people are not aware that they're required to pause maybe and breathe longer. And what you're saying is the vocalization. That's so important.
Try it for a day or two and see if that rocks your boat or changes something in the way you feel. Just a lot of us say Om. A lot of us just say Ha. A lot of us say, this isn't tied into any particular cultural baggage. It's as universal as you can make it. So even I can't even say, okay, make this sound, or say it like this, or sing it this way. All of that is totally up to the person that wants to really just, let it out, be heard.
That's so interesting. Like, we always think being heard is about my thoughts and my words and my emotions. But what you're saying is being heard is about just the voice and the physical act of the producing sound. And that by itself becomes your first major journey or step towards expression. That's brilliant. That's so wonderful to even think about.
So from a perspective of yoga, we have, our chakra system, which is our energy body. And so there are sounds that are associated with our energy body, with the different chakras. So it could just be that for people who believe in that philosophy. For people who are okay saying a sound like Om, it's really one of the most perfect sounds scientifically, because it's a circular sound, and it really dispels quite a lot of it
recharges you in a way.
The vibration of that particular sound really sort of recharges you, like you say. Or you could also say that it makes your energy body vibrate in a way that it allows for you to regenerate, like in your emotional state and things like that. So it really depends on what belief system each person has, and it's really not in my place to say one should do this or one should do that.
So when we look at graphology, and I was drawing connections in my mind, because when I look at the handwriting stroke, for me it is the physical expression of the mind. So I have your handwriting sample with me, and I was looking at certain aspects. So I was looking at first, and the most important thing for me is your connection with art or music or self-expression. Now, we spoke about expression so much, but when I look at your writing, one thing that stood out is, as a person, you are an introvert. You take a lot of time. You take a lot of time before you really trust somebody to open up emotionally. So you may speak, you may communicate very clearly, but when it comes to opening up and sharing your emotional space, it has a lot to do with knowing the person, trusting the person, and it's almost like like an unknown test that the other person is subjected to. And when they they qualify and walk through 5 stages, is when you say, okay, now you qualify, so now I can open up and talk about it.
What gave you that, what brought you to that
So
conclusion?
handwriting has 800 parts. So the permutation and combination of which talks about your personality. But when it comes to expression, one of the things that we look at is the slant of the writing. So sometimes people have slant that moves towards the right, which talks about how they are expressive, they want to connect. It's almost like somebody leaning towards you. Then there's a slant which is straight, where you take time and you evaluate the situation. It's like Hindi movie Diwar, where you are like the Amitabh Bachchan in that character. He takes time, right? He's not open, he's not jumping. And then you have a slant that goes slightly backwards, which is going to the left. And that slant talks about somebody really taking time. So your handwriting moves from the left to the straight, and it is in that range. So when you see the range of writing in terms of the tilt of the writing, it talks about how you connect and how easily you open up.
I found that my handwriting kind of, it goes back and forth. Depends on where I'm sitting and writing.
So even if you think so, even if it goes back and forth, there's a kind of formation which is consistent. So what you think is moving, for me, it's because it's a graph. The graphology is a study of graph. So it creates a graph which shows steadier movement. So if we look at, say, an ECG reading, we would look at it as like some erratic movement. But for a doctor who understands it, it's a graph that tells him that how it works, or tells her how to interpret it. So that's what happens. If you think your handwriting is moving, it's really not moving that much.
Okay.
So your enthusiasm and your willingness to jump in the face of a challenge or a conflict or even a problem, adversity, is a very signature move that people who are close to you would connect to. Like if you are given a problem, you would rarely back off. You would say, okay, there's a problem, there's something for me to learn, let me jump in and figure it out. And that's so different and interesting because you see people around, they freak out when things get tougher. You come alive when things get tougher.
To me, there's no, sense in backing down if there's something in your way. I don't know. It's no.
So do you remember something where things were like really difficult and most people thought of giving up or quitting, and you were there looking at it as an excited child who wanted to figure it out?
I would say my choice of career would pretty much signal that. But also, to go back to before, to when I was finishing my degree. And I knew my parents wanted me to do a master's degree, and they didn't really want me to lose a year or to, squander away time as they looked at it. But I remember having these long negotiations, I call them, saying I need, everything that I wanted to do has always been priority two, in comparison to whatever you guys have wanted me to do. So you need to give, in all fairness, you need to give me a year to see at least if, there's any chance of me being able to chase whatever, my dream or whatever. So that conversation, I think, happened in my final year degree.
Okay.
And then after my exams, I took a year off officially. Like I kind of said, no, I'm not applying to a master's program. And then I don't know what it was, but there was this confidence, I would say, of trying something out and saying, okay, I'm willing to accept failure if by the end of this year nothing happens. Then okay,
I'll accept.
I'm willing to accept it as a failure and then move onwards into something else that seems more plausible.
So what happened in that year?
Everything, So within a month, I went to Chennai because my parents were a little wary of me going to Bombay. And then I walked into a record label, did an audition. They signed me. And then they asked me to make a demo so that we could figure out what kind of album we wanted to make. And then in the meantime, there were lots of people who wanted to cast me in films. So a lot of them I said no to because, I didn't have any experience. And then, of course, the singing assignments started to roll in. So pretty much in the matter of, I'd say 2 months, I had quite a few options to choose from. In a sense.
Incredible. And that wouldn't have happened if you wouldn't have jumped and chosen the journey that you did.
Yeah, if I hadn't kind of said, no, I need this time to go do what I want to do and see if... And I think the important thing there is to be okay with it not working.
Sure.
And that, and that was something that I remember I was okay with. I was like, if nothing happens at the end of the year, none of us lost anything. It's just a year gone.
So what you're also saying, Vasundhara, is so interesting that you're saying that, okay, that was a time, and even till date you keep doing this, that you keep trying out things that you believe in. And if they work out, if they play out, great. If they do not play out, you're okay accepting defeat. You're okay accepting the experiment has failed. But experimenting is a higher commitment than actually being result oriented.
Yeah, to be able to put yourself in that position of possible disappointment.
I love that term.
Or
I love that term. That's so powerful.
Because at the end of the day, you need to. At the end of the day, you need to be okay with it. You need to be able to live with it.
And mostly people struggle to live with themselves when they do not do what they knew was possible. If you wouldn't have taken the break, it wouldn't have been possible anyways.
Yeah, I might have lived to regret it. That was not something that I was willing to wager. This. So I'm not the only one. A lot of us are. We come to those crossroads many times in our lives. But the important thing for us to recognize is that we need to be objective in that moment, and be able to kind of say, okay, what are my boundaries here? What am I going to be okay with? What am I going to, what's going to adversely affect me? And what is that adverse effect? What is it? What is the worst?
How do you decide that? Like, when you say, I would like to accept disappointment or failures, how do you decide the boundary of failure? Like, I've seen people staying hopeful on the journey. They're like, no, let me give one more try. Let me try it out. So for you, when you do it, is it time bound? Is it result bound? How do you decide when is it the time to give up or quit?
So there are different things that happen for us at different times, right? At that time, when I set out to start my life or my career, I clearly had like a window of a year to come back with something that was going to be
worth the shot,
enough for that particular time frame. I hadn't, in my wildest dreams, I hadn't said, no, I'm going to sing a song with Rahman. I'm going to be an actress in a movie.
or at an international level. It's not even like just an acting gig. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't sort of, and to be very honest, I don't think that my wish list was really to be in any of this. Like, I didn't really walk in or walk out of my house saying, my dream is to be a playback singer. No, I wanted to sing. I wanted to be a singer. And I don't know why or how, living in India, it didn't occur to me that I should be a playback singer. To me, it's about, how memorable is your work. That's also, an equal measure of what
of course. And how intense you are and how engaged you are with the activity and people around you. So we have a segment in our conversation called Autograph Please, in which I talk about your signature specifically. Now, signatures are about your public image. So handwriting talks about who you are, whereas signature talks about how people perceive you. And sometimes, all of us wear masks and not COVID, but otherwise we wear these masks to please other people or keep it at bay. But the difference in your signature and your handwriting in a peculiar way talks about how people misunderstand you. So Autograph Please segment is about talking about how people misunderstand you in a way. So in your signature, the way you write the first letter V is very sharp. The bottom part of the V is very pointed, and that talks about your analytical thinking. Now, as a person, when you are in an argument, if you're getting bored in conversations, if people are doing small talks with you, your frustration shows on your face. And no matter how hard you try, you can't hide that irritation or frustration if you disagree. So because you're very logical in your thinking with people like that, they think that you are not approachable easily, which is not true. When people start talking to you, they realize like, oh my God, why was I thinking like this? But in the moment when you're perceived like that, because you ask logical questions, because you're not easy to be convinced, people think probably you're not approachable. So you get that a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I get this reaction quite a lot that, people walk up to me and talk to me, and then after that they say we didn't think it would be so easy to connect with you.
And your connections, also because you're an introvert, the connections are way deeper. So when you build friendships, they stay with you. You don't keep in touch with people regularly, but every time you meet your friends, over the years you must have experienced it, the relationships are fresh. So you can pick up wherever you dropped, and the conversations are very, very deep and real. So I feel your way of being very unapproachable is also your way to not engage in small talks. It helps you not have people around you who are just like saying things to please you.
Yeah, that's for sure. No, I feel like a lot changed in terms of my relationships with my friends when suddenly, I was in the papers for, for my work. And so overnight, it dawned on me after, like, say, in a month or two after, I had started working and people had started writing about me. But suddenly I wasn't hearing from my friends anymore. They weren't calling.
They thought you were now in that other category.
And so then I remember thinking about it, and I said, okay, how would it be from their perspective, looking at all of this from the outside? And I realized that they wouldn't know that I haven't changed unless I let them know.
So you reached out?
So at one point I just reached out and I called all the people that I wanted in my life, and I called up and I said, all of this might have happened, but nothing's really changed. I'm the same person, and we don't need to be any different, that kind of thing. And also I have to say that my family was very grounded around me, and Roberto has been my best friend through it all. So he was very real with me. He would always kind of say it the way it was, and that's the person he is. So all of that kind of really helped keeping it real. And also the realization that, if you lock yourself up in an ivory tower and don't let people in, then who's losing out? Really?
Is there any question that you have that is, something that is active for you, something that is, say, bothering, that is troubling, or something I can look at in your writing and talk about?
I think, a lot of us go through so many different transition points in our lives. And I'm pretty certain that this particular time is a huge transition point for all of us, no matter what we do. So, maybe, do you see any of that?
So, I must say that in your case, transition is a way for you to be. So, it's not a specific transition that is happening now. If transitions do not happen, you feel uneasy and you keep creating your own learning curve. So, this has been interesting because it was forced externally also. But other than that, you have always chased your own transitions. So you set out something that is uncomfortable and then you go for it. and then you set out something else, and then you go for it. So you have always made choices and decisions like that. So which is very interesting to look at. Now, one of the things that I feel is you moving away from something. So it could be a physical space that you had created or an emotional commitment that you had created. So when people move their jobs, I see the transition in a way that they move away from the older space that was theirs. Now, to do that, anytime you decide to pack bags and move, there's so much that goes through because it took so long to connect with something. So I see a transition at that level where you're moving away from something that you had built. And there is it's almost like a slight breakup that you're going through internally, where you're coming to terms with your new reality, coming to terms with how things were or how you had envisaged them. And now you say, okay, that's not happening. So I have to rebuild my connection, say with the activity, but not in the manner that I had thought about it. So that is in a way heartbreaking. So I see that transition where you are, if I may use the word, it looks to me more professional or probably in a friendship or a relationship like that, not in your personal life. But I feel it's almost like nursing a heartbreak because you're so emotionally involved and invested in that idea. You feel like, oh my God, how would I rebuild my life around it?
Interesting.
So before we end the conversation, I have two quick questions for you. One, which was your favorite failure? And second, is there any quote that you live by or something that you use as a reminder on the process, on the journey?
But there was a time, which I think this was a deeply impactful experience for me, where I auditioned for a Western musical, and in fact got the role, and then was not able to fulfill it because of some bureaucracy.
Okay. Oh my God.
And I took that really to heart quite a lot, And I think that the failure wasn't in not being able to do it. I think the failure, to be very honest, was in taking it out on myself the way I did. Because I think that up until then, I had not faced rejection in a way that I faced it then by somebody who didn't matter, And I think that's what hurt the most. And so obviously the way I dealt with that was, you could call that a failure, a huge failure.
Why do you call that failure?
I didn't pick up, because I didn't pick up and walk away from it the way I usually would otherwise. And I think that was that's what I mean was the failure, was in not allowing it to affect me as deeply as it did, and to just pick it up and walk away from it and move forward from it. That would be.
Okay. And what is your favorite quote or mantra that you kind of keep reminding yourself while going through tough journeys?
I just, keep reminding myself to take deep breaths. I've realized that I've been doing that so, since I was a young kid, I think, because that's what I would hear my mom say, take a deep breath. So I'm always take a deep breath.
So anything that is happening in your life, anything is going chaotic, you just take a breath. Like that's what you require. I think we should make it a mantra for everybody. We should make posters and stickers of that statement.
Because it makes you pause, it just makes you kind of immediately stop whatever's the surface reaction to whatever's happening. It makes you pause. And then it allows you to kind of quickly process it, to say whether
working,
it's
not working.
Worth that kind of reaction.
I talk about response versus reaction. So a breath is a great mechanism to move from reaction to response. So I think what your mother taught you to do unknowingly or without making it very psychological was this. Take a breath and then you will know what you require to do in the moment.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was very interesting. I think for all of us who are listening, and even for me, there were so many moments of learning new things about voice and expressing yourself and using simple tools to really, really find your own voice. So I think, thank you. Thank you so much. This was really, really great.
Thank you for speaking to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Absolutely Right. I love that part where Vasundhara decided to experiment with her life for 1 year. She said even though she had to negotiate her way with her parents and it wasn't easy, she owed it to herself. What was your favorite part? Send me your feedback and questions on my Instagram handle at Aditi Surana. We all need to weigh our options every now and then. What do you base your decisions on? Your fears, your desires, or your inspirations? I say this often. Your experience of life is not based on what you do, but how you feel when you do it. I see so many people who feel frustrated, irritated, anxious, even when they're doing the right thing. Unfortunately, they do not feel very happy about doing the right thing. Let's discuss this topic in detail on our Friday episode. Before I say goodbye, let me invite you to join me on my Instagram live every Monday at 8:30 a.m. I start my week on a calmer note with my favorite graphotherapy practice, a simple Zen doodle-like handwriting movement that takes just 12 minutes. If you want to know more about it, all the details are mentioned on my website link, aditisurana.com/Kamasutra, CALMSUTRA. If you like this podcast, then don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Let's connect on Friday. Till then, happy writing!
Are you constantly seeking happiness? Wondering how to make the most of every day? How not to let your inhibitions stop you from achieving your goals? It's now time to get your A game on. It's time to unlock your true potential. Tune in to the Empowering series with me, Zarina Poonawalla, to feel empowered in all genres of life. From behavioral skills to management skills. From health to relationships. From mental well-being to emotional well-being. And of course, your finances. I've got you covered. With these tips and tricks from me, Zarina, and true life stories from my amazing guests, you're bound to bring your purest to the table. Tune in to the Empowering series with Zarina Poonawalla every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Do you have a night routine? Well, everyone has one. And the to-do list usually looks like this. Brush your teeth, set that alarm, get into your pajamas, and switch off those screens. But here's one more to add to that list. Tune into the Positively Unlimited podcast for a dose of positive action and tips on how to build powerful mindsets. Episodes out every Monday on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you tune into podcasts.